We want to talk about like some of the pressures, and this doesn't only apply to our industry, which is big tech for first time listeners or people who may not be familiar with our backgrounds, but
Mhm.
this is also all the other like high pressure, high kind of expectation industries, right? We're talking about consulting, we're talking about investment banking, we're talking about finance, we're talking about like these very like high pressure, high expectation, like very kind of demanding corporate white collar jobs, right? And if we want to talk about like, a lot of times we see these super fancy titles, lucrative, you know, signing bonuses and salaries.
Million dollar
And it,
stock options.
yeah, right. And to a lot of people, right, to hungry college students, to people who are trying to make a name for themselves, get out into the world and make a splash in corporate, like this is very enticing to them, right? This is very much like this is what I work for, this is what I want, right? And so and rightfully so. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think that now that, like I said, both Thomas and myself have kind of been in the swing of things for almost a year now coming up. I think it makes a year for you next month and then a year for me in August, right? So it's like I said, by no means do we have 20 year, 10 years in our respective roles, but it's like you can learn a lot in a year. Um and so one of the biggest things that's kind of like been like I think a recurring theme for us has just been like obviously the difference between what's plastered online and what actually goes on behind the scenes, I think can apply to a lot of things. But I want to talk about a lot just about like the some of the mental health implications of kind of like the expectations and kind of like just the kind of like grueling. I don't say grueling, but like some of the just the high kind of like demand behind or expectations behind like some of the work that we do. And how that kind of like translates to like, how you carry yourself and how that kind of makes you, how it makes you feel. I don't want to disrespect like actual people who are doing like real like physical labor who really have something to complain about. People who are like, welding or like on oil rigs or things like that, or like kind of like doing manual labor, things like that. By no means are these comparable. But I really do kind of just want to touch a bit on like the mental health aspect and kind of like just like what does that look like behind the scenes? Like what does that look like when you actually are working for one of the biggest companies in the world and it feels like, stuff just keeps piling and piling and piling and piling on top of you. Like, and it's like, in your mind, it's like, hey, I'm getting paid X amount of money. I need to keep performing. I need to keep succeeding with all these kind of like looming pressures of things on the background, right? There's all these things about, agentic AI, right? There's things about layoffs. There's things about like, your team being an underperformer in the company, right? It's just all these like, reorgs in the company. Like it's all these kind of like floating things I think that go around in the back of our heads while trying to balance being, a top performer, someone who still delivers impact, someone who still does a really good job at, doing their job, right? So I think like all these things, like it's a lot, it's a lot of different, I think, routes we can go down, but wanted to kind of get your perspective on what's that's been like for you and what you would share to someone who's considering, trying to get into one of these spaces that we're in right now.
Yeah.